Thrilled today to welcome Samantha Cox to AdminChat. Sam Cox worked for 4 years for Sir Richard Branson and supported him during some of the most pivotal points in his life, including the fire at the Great House on Necker Island, which engulfed most of the island. It's testament to Sam's resilience and to her foresight that she was able to support both Sir Richard and his family through that devastating time. And today she has agreed to share her experience with us, which is particularly relevant in the wake of the LA fires, in order to help assistants to understand how they can prepare for disasters, how to help support emotionally, the things that you should have on your checklist, and maybe some things that you hadn't thought of. It's a remarkable story, and I am so thrilled that I'm able to share it with you all. Let's welcome Samantha Cox. So good to see you. It's always so good to see you. How are things?
I'm great, thanks, Lucy. How are you? Happy New Year. It's wonderful to see you too.
Yes, Happy New Year to you. I am so thrilled that you've agreed to do this for us because I think it's going to be a really useful admin chat from all sorts of different points of view. But I wondered if we could go back firstly to the night of the fire, and if you can talk to us about when the fire broke out on Necker Island and what was going through your mind as events unfolded.
Oh, Lucy, and it's funny because I don't think about it that often, but when I do, it literally transports me back to that moment. And I remember I'd been out, it was on a Sunday evening, I'd been out for the weekend, I'd come back to Ireland, and we'd been told there was going to be a tropical storm. And I think that, I'd been there for a number of years at this stage. So we were used to tropical storms, we were used to hurricanes, and a tropical storm was nothing major. It was a case of there would be lots of lightning, thunder, those types of things, but nothing major. And I remember I woke up about 3 a.m. in the morning to somebody knocking on my door, and it was one of our maintenance guys. And I answered the door, and I could hear the torrential rain on my yurt, which is where I lived. And I thought to myself, what's happening? Somebody's tapping on my door at 3 a.m. in the morning. And I've opened the door, and Erwin said to me, Sam, there's a major fire, we need to get you up to Richard's house. And I kind of looked at him saying, what do you mean there's a fire? Like, there's no way anything could be on fire now. The rain is literally torrential. And but then I looked up in the sky, and the sky was bright red. And I just thought to myself, whatever's happened, this is not just a small fire in the kitchen or a small fire in one of the, villas. This is a major, major fire. And so we got all the other staff in the staff village onto the golf buggies. And the way Neck is laid out, you've got the main house that, that accommodates all guests and has a beautiful living and entertainment area. And then Richard has a private dwelling kind of in the middle of the island. And then to the bottom of the island is the staff area. And so all of us, I will never forget to this day the adrenaline in my legs shaking. And we've gone up to Richard's house, and it's torrential rain, and I'm looking now over at the grand house, and it's ablaze. And for probably 3 minutes, but felt like a day, I'm thinking to myself, goodness, whoever's in there, they have not survived this. There is no way. And then eventually, after 3 minutes, which, like I said, felt like a lifetime, I realized that everybody had been evacuated from the main house, and they'd gone up to Richard's bedroom. And he has a setup of a lounge area, a kitchen, and then his bedroom. So unbeknown to me, everybody had been rescued and taken into his bedroom, all in a complete hurry and a complete daze. But thankfully, everybody was there. And then it was a case of, okay, what do we do? And I think adrenaline takes over, survival takes over. But it definitely was absolutely horrifying, something I will never ever forget, and very, very scary.
Absolutely. And for you, of course, I would have thought you're human in the moment and you're terrified and all that stuff. But also, as an EA, how did you kick into kind of organizing your response? Because I would have thought in those critical moments, there were things where you were suddenly, once you realized everybody was safe, of course, then it's starting to coordinate how you're going to make things work, I guess.
Oh, and I think, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, so everybody's half asleep anyway. Your adrenaline's kicked in, it's pitch black, there's a huge fire, it's torrential rain, there's a huge tropical storm happening. So all your senses are kind of out of whack. But for me, the first thing was, and thank goodness, one of our staff members, when they realized the fire had happened, or was happening, they'd gone past my office, which was in the main house, and grabbed mine and Helen's laptop. Helen being Richard's other EA at the time, who still is, and you know very well, Lucy. But Helen was overseas on holiday, so it was just me on Necker. And I had, a huge group of Richard's family and friends, including Kate Winslet, Richard's mum, who was still alive, Eve, at the time. And thankfully, like I said, one of our staff members had gone into my office, grabbed my laptop, and brought it over to where we were. Not that we knew that instantly, because I think as most awful situations like that, you're in complete shock. My number one thing was, I went into Richard's room, there were probably maybe 25, 30 people in there. Everybody was in complete shock, and I go over to Richard and I'm like, Richard, are you okay? And for probably the first couple of hours, we just sat there and watched the fire. There was nothing really we could do in that instant. And like I said, it was 3 a.m. in the morning. One thing I did personally was I made sure that I phoned my mum, phoned my dad, and my twin sister was on holiday in Bali at the time. So I sent an email by fax back in the day, to her saying, you're going to hear this on the news, especially in England, because it was August, so Parliament was out. So the news was, looking for things to report about. I said, you're going to hear this quite quickly. Thankfully, I'm safe, everybody's safe, but this is currently what's happening.
About supporting Sir Richard and the family in the aftermath of all that, because clearly he'd lost a beautiful home and there were lots of cherished memories and history.
And and for me personally, I was obviously in shock. I'd lived on Necker for almost 4 years, and so I was devastated, and I couldn't imagine. Richard had built Necker from scratch many years prior and had, like you said, many, many, many memories there. So initially, I didn't take a step back from Richard, but he had his mum there. He had Holly and Sam there. Joan were there. He had his nephews and nieces. He had some really good family members. So I think initially it was a case of, okay, I need to put my work action brain on here. I'm going to let Richard go through this with his family and the people he loves the most, so they can support one another. And I'm going to see what I can start to do in the background. And at that stage, Virgin Gorda, which is opposite Necker in the British Virgin Islands, I was starting to get text messages and phone calls saying, Sam, we can see there's a big fire on Necker. What's happening? And I remember quite vividly, Holly Branson came to me and said, Sam, I've got nothing to wear. Like, because it was 3 a.m. in the morning, they evacuated within seconds. Everybody left their passports behind, their clothes behind, ID behind, you name it. So they literally had the pajamas on. And so for me, I'm like, okay, Holly, we'll go down to my yurt, raid my wardrobe, find something to put on. But I think initially it was, and I remember this again clearly, Richard and his family stayed very much in Richard's bedroom, because I think they wanted to have that experience together.
Well, yes, a very sad experience, but yes, I get that totally.
Yeah.
So for you, logistically then, what kind of issues did you face in the aftermath and how did you go about managing them? Because if they had lost their passports and all that documentation, that must have been a nightmare.
Oh, and Lucy, it was really a nightmare. And again, I think, and this is probably one of the big things I'd like your viewers to get out from this. And it took me, an hour or so to kind of get my thoughts into order. But it was a case of, okay, well, who is my network right now? Who can I reach out to? Who can I ask? Who can I, you know, ask a favor, ask for support for? And one of the big things was, I had contacts in the American embassy. I had contacts in the English embassy, so it was a case of, okay, well, I've got all these people without passports now who need to get back to their respective homes. How am I going to do it? Knowing that they've got no really, it's not like a case of, well, here's my driver's license to prove who I am. Most people lost everything. So I relied on my network. And again, I had to get my thought process in check. I had to calm myself down. I had to go, okay, what's happening here? And then went, okay, well, it's just me right now. Helen's on holiday. And then it was funny because when I phoned Helen to say it happened, she's like, shall I come back? And I said, well, there's no point really. She was away in Europe, and but really trying to go, okay, what do we need? What don't we have? What do we need to kind of move forward? And it was relying on my network and reaching out, saying, listen, this is the situation. This is what's happened. How can you help me?
disaster preparedness protocols in place already at Necker Island? Because I know that obviously you're in a hurricane zone, aren't you, in the first place?
Very.
And were there gaps in that when it came to it?
Yeah. And I truthfully, I don't actually think that we really thought about fire. We thought many times, and prior to the fire, I'd been in probably 2 hurricanes on Necker, and it was always a case of, all the staff village members were told to put in a backpack, put your passport, put any medicine, bring your laptop, bring anything that's really important to you in a backpack, and then, we'll find somewhere safe on Necker to stay. But I think with the fire, because it was so unexpected, like most fires are, unfortunately, no, there wasn't really any preparation. And fire, as people know, it can change in direction, it can move in certain ways. And I think that we had in our office, we had fireproof filing cabinets that had a lot of Richard's beautiful diaries and memoirs and all sorts of bits and pieces. But the fire was so strong, it demolished it. It burnt everything. So even though we'd put in place what we thought would protect us from a fire, it didn't actually. Even our servers were downstairs in the wine cellar on Necker, and they were absolutely, destroyed. So it was a case of, okay, well, we've lost almost everything. Thank God, like I said, my laptop had been saved, but it became a bit of a standing joke that, 2 or 3 weeks down the line, Richard would ask for something and we'd be like, burn in the fire, which at the time later on we could joke about. But, I think after that, going forward, there were other ways we could have prepared in case of an emergency like a fire.
How would you go about setting that up?
Oh, listen, I think now, and technology was very different then, but technology is so amazing now. But, when it comes to technology, make sure you've got everything saved to the cloud. Your servers are great, but if you've got things saved to the cloud, whether it's copies of your passports, medical records, insurance, health insurance, really important documents, even if it's sentimental stuff that you can take a photo of and scan in or whatever it may be, but really using technology that, even if your phone gets destroyed, eventually you should be able to get onto something that you can go, okay, well, I'm going to download it from the cloud. But I think using technology nowadays, of course, there's things, I had a beautiful book that Nelson Mandela had signed for me, which I lost in the fire. I had a number of bits and pieces. I remember Richard had gone to Princess Diana's funeral, and so he had her program from her funeral that was in what we thought was a safe, but that got destroyed. So there's those sentimental things that could never be replaced. But Richard's outlook on it was, at the end of the day, belongings can be replaced, humans can't, and thankfully everybody got out safely.
Was going to be my next question, actually. How did his leadership style influence the way that you dealt with it? And what lessons did you learn from working so closely with him during that time?
I don't think I know from having all his dearest and nearest on Necker, and nobody was hurt in any way, shape, or form. That was his priority. And probably within about maybe at least the first 24 hours, his focus was that everybody was safe. And yes, it was devastating that the fire was happening. It was devastating that we'd lost the home, the office, some, really serious memories. But as far as he was concerned, everybody's safe. And Richard is a very positive thinking person. I think for me personally, and it wasn't initially the first couple of days, but my house became the office. And so Richard was now coming into my little home every day with his sandy beach shoes, and and so our space got quite close in a short space of time. And so I just had to remind myself that I'm a very neat, tidy person, and Richard's walking through my house with sandy shoes. I had to kind of relax around my house rules. But he definitely saw it as a case of nobody has been seriously hurt. Everybody's safe. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's sad, but almost out of the phoenix, comes new beginnings and new things and learnings and all those types of things. So I like to think we dealt with it well. There were a few times, that Richard would say to me, "Oh, the phone reception's not great," and I'm like, "Well, because we lost it in the fire, because we'd have this big master technology on top of the roof, and then we lost it." But yes, so I think, again, just taking that breath, going, okay, what can we do? How can we do it? But Richard was very positive about the situation in a bad situation.
Own emotions, because I would have thought, although your role there is to support everybody, for you it must have been really quite a traumatic experience.
Oh, Lucy, and it still is. When I go back into it, I was probably the eldest staff member on island, really, apart from a couple of engineers that lived off island. I always think I was probably the oldest staff member on island by about maybe 5 or 6 years. And so a lot of the team came to me, and we had probably 12 or 13 expats, water sports people, tennis coaches, those types of things on island. And I actually, the first couple of days was fine. And then Richard's jet was actually flying from England back to the BVI because it had some maintenance work. And I actually asked whether my mum could fly back on it. And so mum came out, and she became the mother hen in the staff village. She baked for everybody. She cleaned my house. Not that it needed cleaning, but it was a case of, it was just, I guess, what Richard was doing with his family. I needed an element of that with my family, being the staff members and mum. But yeah, it was heartbreaking, because the after effect of that was as well, lots of people then didn't have a job because Necker no longer could function as Necker. So a lot of the team members were laid off, and it was a lot. Obviously, my role with Richard didn't change, but there was a lot going on, all because of a fire.
Lindy came out. That's a really interesting dynamic, and I hadn't known that before. And I
Yeah.
can see, quite knowing your mum, how amazing she would have been in that situation.
Yes. It was definitely, no matter how old you are, you always need your mum, right? Especially in quite stressful, awful times. It's like, I just want my mum, and my mum was there, so that was amazing.
Oh, fantastic. So listen, you're a little way down the line now. How did you help with the recovery and rebuilding process on Necker Island? And what was your role in coordinating the efforts to get everything back on track?
To be honest, I didn't play a major part in that side of things. Virgin Limited Edition, that run Necker as one of the Virgin Limited Edition properties of Richard's around the world, they were very much hands-on. They had some amazing engineers, but I think from my perspective, it was coordinating those meetings with Richard, coordinating those meetings with the team, looking at potential drawings, looking at potential rebuild, what does that look like, and really trying to provide that connection to all the dots to make sure that Richard could efficiently and as quickly as possible start to approve things to get things back on track. And Holly was, his daughter was due to get married there in the December, and she was married, and it was due to get married in the main house, and in the end she still did, but she got married in the rubbles, and it was actually the most beautiful wedding, because it was kind of a bit mysterious and beautiful. But I think initially trying to get Richard and me, to help support the build process and how we were going to move forward, it was a case of really allowing time in his diary to go, okay, well, Richard's needed to do this. He needs to have these conversations, and making that a priority over other things that were requested of him.
So what were the major lessons that you took away from this experience of managing this crisis?
Okay, try and stay calm. And I say that with a smile, but and I think I learned this from Richard. Even though Richard ran to the house to get people out of the house barefoot, through needles of cactus and all those sorts of things, he was incredibly calm. That doesn't surprise me. Richard's done amazing things. He's traveled around the world in hot air balloons, so he's a very calm person. But I think that probably taught me more than anything to try and stay calm. We were lucky, like I said, we didn't, nobody was seriously injured, and so that has another effect, I guess. But I think just trying to stay calm and going, okay, well, this is what's happened. How do we then move forward from this? And in those moments, really taking that deep breath and going, okay, I'm going to stay calm. I'm going to be organized. I'm going to, like I said, thank God somebody got my laptop. But in future, try and remember to take your laptops with you. Again, technology is different now, so lots of it's saved in a different way. But being organized when it comes to your belongings, I guess. Like I said, it was a tropical storm as well, so I always normally had a bag by the door which had my passport and other bits and pieces. I would normally look after Richard's passport. And you'd be surprised how important the passport is in life, but trying to keep those documents safe and organized and ready for you, so you can just pick up a bag and leave.
Mm. checklists that you would have in place maybe moving forwards for things that you would get
Yeah.
out? Because I think, there's all sorts of tools and resources out there, I think, for EAs to have at their disposal if they need to effectively handle disasters. I know Bonnie Lowe Craman has an excellent one, and that might be a really good place to start. But how do you think assistants can build their resilience if you're in a situation like this?
I think we're quite resilient anyway, because that's what we do for a job, right? So we're pretty tough, we're pretty resilient. I think mine came with just lessons of life that helped me deal with it. And when you've got a strong leader like Richard, who leads by example, you've almost got somebody to follow. Again, we never expected it to happen. The whole time I was there, yes, we saw hurricanes and we had really good hurricane plans in place. We had, you think that it's going to be the worst, but you pray for the best. So you prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. But I think building that resilience, it's a tough one because it's something that after the fact it's happened, I think my resilience really played a role. And I wish it doesn't happen for anyone because it's awful, it's traumatic, it's scary, it's frightening. But I think you eventually get there and go, okay. But like I said, seeing Richard and how resilient he was, it's okay. So I'm learning from him. But yeah, I think each situation is different and each person's reaction is different.
Give you a slightly different angle, because obviously with Richard being who he was, you were dealing with a lot of media and you were dealing with external parties, I would have thought, who were really interested in exactly how it was all dealt with. What would you give as advice to EAs in the middle of all that chaos who have got that kind of crisis communication thing going on?
Well, we had it. It wasn't funny, but it was funny. So within probably about 4 or 5 hours of it happening, we had a helicopter land on our helipad, and it was with a journalist who wanted to get the first scoop on it. And so I've gone down there and I've said, what are you doing? We're actually going through something that's really quite frightening right now. And I think in the end, and I can't remember exactly, but I think I said to them, if you want to take some photos, you need to donate to Virgin Unite, which is Richard's foundation. Thankfully, again, reach out to your network. Richard's PR teams around the world are amazing. And so I made the phone call to London. I made the phone call to New York. Like I said, in England at the time, Parliament was out. And so it was August. So this was really juicy news for August in England. And it was a case of, okay, so let me reach out to our PR teams and see what they can do so they can spread the word. They can start to talk to their contacts because I'm not a PR expert. I was Richard's CA, but I knew that our PR team were experts. So again, my thought process was, okay, well, they can start to manage these small little issues or these questions that are coming up so I can really focus on Richard getting travel documents, getting clothes, like both locally and globally. The support that I got from my network was amazing. I had people who run a surf shop on Virgin Gorda that all of a sudden a boat turned up and it was a bag full of shorts and t-shirts and flip-flops. I had people in America who were saying, Sam, listen, we can get passports, give us a list, give us dates of birth, give us a home address, and we can help you with not full passports, but travel documents. So PR was brilliant. The PR teams around the world were brilliant, but I truly think delegating and asking people for help saved me and supported me.
Yes. Well, you never know how you're going to react in that situation, I guess. How long did it take to put it all back together again?
Well, like I said, this happened in the August. Holly got married in the December, and I think the main house opened about a year later. But from our perspective, from Richard's working world, we were very much back in working mode, or I was definitely within a couple of days. The actual build on Necker, that took much longer. We then allocated, we moved a few people around. Like I said, a few people, or a lot of the staff then were laid off. So they had accommodation on Necker, which we then turned into mine and Helen's office, which used to be somebody's home. So then we had a working office again. But even silly things like our photocopier got, obviously it melted, it got completely destroyed. And I remember when Helen got back to Necker and I said, Helen, I need to take you to the office and show you. she looked at the photocopy and she went, "Who took the photocopier?" I'm like, "It burnt in the fire." So things like that. And it was a huge photocopier with fax, I'm sure you get smaller ones nowadays. But those types of things took a while to then get them back on Necker. It wasn't like we were in New York or London where these things, you can walk down the street and buy. These things took time. But I would have thought probably by the October, things were almost back on track. Richard would still ask for things that were in the cabinet that we lost, or certain files in the office, and at times, like I said, it became a standing joke of, "Oh, we burnt in the fire." And then when people were asked for certain things that Richard didn't want to provide, he'd look at me and went, "It burnt in the fire." Kind of thing. But yeah, it took some time, and I'm still amazed at the team on Necker and Richard, and how amazing and how we just all came together and supported one another.
It's with hindsight, were there things that you would have put in place earlier? I mean, what changes would you have made to that disaster preparedness plan if you were doing it all again?
Yeah, 100%. I would have made sure that, if things were fireproof, they were truly fireproof. I think that we would have definitely made sure that our servers weren't on the same island as us, and they would have been in London or wherever they could have been. I would have made sure that some of our backup stuff, and some of Richard's diaries and his writings were recorded either digitally, or some ways that we could have backed them up, so if we were to lose the physical documents, that we had them elsewhere. So 100% there were things, and like I said, when it comes to IT and technology, it's evolved so much now that we can store things, and we probably had it then. I'm talking 2011 this happened, so we definitely had it, but we just weren't using it efficiently. Whereas now, I would definitely, and I think I do it personally now much more often. It's a case of, I've got my passport saved to the iCloud. I've got my documents when it comes to my medical history. I've got, our home insurance, all those types of things. So if, God forbid, anything happened, I could go, okay, well, let me go and find them. We've saved them somewhere that's not a physical in the office at home.
Clearly, the poor people in LA have just been going through this terrible experience, and I know that they're very much in your thoughts right now because it's so close to home. Uh, but they will have EAs who are supporting them, and many of them will have lost their homes, and some of them, their entire businesses will also have gone up in smoke. What practical advice would you give those EAs for just being as supportive as they possibly could in this very difficult time?
you know, I I think with Richard it was that empathy, that trying to really understand. Richard had lost his home of many, many years that he'd built up and had all these memories. So taking the time away for him to really allow him to process things. And I think as EAs, yes, we need to be there to support, but sometimes we also need to take a step back and then really think of, and everybody's different and everybody will know their bosses differently and what their priorities are, but really kind of going, okay, so let's build a priority list here. What do I, as Richard's EA, thinks is going to be really important to him, and almost walk through that list of, okay, well, maybe my boss has got a medical need every day. Where's his medicine? Have we got backup? Who's his doctor? Can I get another appointment? Can I get more prescriptions for him? Or my boss is due to travel. Okay, let's figure out what his travel schedule is for the next 3 months and see whether we can change things, accommodate things, what his family needs, what his children needs, those types of things. God forbid, if the school's been affected, okay, what kind of schooling can we look at for his children, her children? So practically going through what priorities are for that individual boss's needs and working through that list.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's a while since you left, and Necker is a distant memory, although I know it's a very beautiful place from the stories that you told me. But you're doing amazing things now, and you're in Australia. Talk to me about what you're doing now, Sam.
Yes, so I am in Australia. I've been back now after leaving Richard. I came back to Australia for a year, and then I was in America for 6 years. I was working for Hard Rock Hotels and Casinos as their director of VIP guest services. Now I've been back in Australia it'll be 6 years in March. And I actually now have my own business called Samantha Cox International. It focuses on a number of things. Some of it is in that guest experience space and working with businesses that want to really drive industry standards on that guest experience. And I also then have a coaching and mentoring platform where I coach a number of business leaders who want to evolve their businesses, especially in that guest experience space. And then I also have a number of EAs that I coach. And so they reach out to me and say, Sam, would love some advice and some coaching in these areas. And so I've got a number of EAs on my books as well, which I love because I love going back to my journey and being able to really support them in their journey, especially if they're younger and haven't been in the EA world for long. But then I can, really help hopefully evolve what they're doing in that space.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure that we put contact details alongside the recording of this so that if any EAs do want to get coaching with Sam, they can reach out. And I think you were going to give them a special offer, weren't you?
Yes, that's correct. So anybody that comes through you will be a 25% discount from what I normally charge. And like I said, that it's my passion, so I enjoy doing it. And the feedback's been great. So yes, if anybody is out there, head over to Samantha Cox International. My contact details there, and I'm sure Lucy will provide them as well.
Yes, just fantastic. And I know that anybody who does that will have an amazing experience. How fantastic to be able to learn from Samantha Cox. Sam, it's always such a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for spending time with us this evening for you. And I hope it's not too long before we get to see each other in person again.
I know, I'm looking forward to that hug, and I truly want to send my my love and kindness to everybody in LA who's been involved in the fires, because I know how heartbreaking it can be. So even here in Australia, because we've been through our own fires, I'm sending lots of love and light and healing and all the rest of it. So yes, thank you, Lucy, for having me today.
Thank you.